Shalom. My name is Rabbi Josh Caruso. I'm from Anshe Chesed Fairmount Temple, and it is my honor to be here today to pay tribute to Maxine and to be here supporting the family as you are. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. A time for dancing, a time for wailing, a time for birthing, a time for dying, a time for speaking, a time for silence, a time for seeking, and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Maxine's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. I invite you to join with me now in the recitation of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Eshet chayil miyimsa. What a precious find is an Eshet chayil, a woman of valor. Her worth is far beyond rubies. Her husband puts his confidence in her and lacks no good thing. She is good to him, never bad, all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy, extends it to the poor. She is clothed with strength and splendor. She looks to the future cheerfully. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She oversees the activities of her household and never eats the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband praises her and says, "Many women have done superbly, but you, Maxine, surpass them all." Charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Extol her for the fruit of her hand. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. After a while, you learn the subtle difference between holding a hand and chaining a soul. And you learn that love doesn't mean leaning, and that company doesn't always mean security. And you learn that kisses aren't contracts and presents aren't promises. And you begin to accept your defeats with your head up and your eyes straight ahead, with the grace of a woman or a man, not the grief of a child. And you learn to build all your roads on today because tomorrow's ground is too uncertain for plans, and futures have a way of falling down in mid-flight. After a while, you learn that even sunshine burns if you bask too much. So you plant your own garden, you decorate your own soul, instead of waiting for someone to bring you flowers. And you learn that you really can endure, and that you really are strong, and that you really have worth. And you learn, with every goodbye, you learn. There are so many family members who belong to Maxine. There's so much buoyant love that is felt for her, that's palpable today. Just a few of her family members are going to share some memories. Her son Larry, and then her grandchildren, Tracy and Julie. Larry.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you all for coming today as we say goodbye to Mom. I'm just going to say ahead of time that this is not going to be some sad lament. Not only would Mom not want that, but we should all be so blessed as to live more than 95 years and pass so peacefully. As far as I'm concerned, I have watched Mom very graciously drift away from us over the course of the last year, as the dementing process tends to affect people. And maybe that's the best way that God can treat a person, as gentle and gracious as Mom. I guess in this case, gentle is as gentle does, because though Mom had her moments of fury, otherwise gentle was the way with Mom. Throughout our childhoods, Sherry and I were blessed with a mother who was always there for us and always imparted the kindness, wisdom, and emotional support they gave us direction in rough waters. No matter how stupid our actions, and that generally pertained to me, though there was always an initial burst of fury, the cloud always had that silver lining of love and benefaction. So it seems fair that, though Mom has gone through some episodes of the fury of ill health, mostly she has been rewarded with a rather peaceful decline. As some of you might know, though I've been in family medicine for 40 years, I have been working with drug and alcohol addicted patients for the last 10 years. During that time, one comes to realize how lucky one is to have had caring, sober parents who are just simply there to lovingly raise you and are neither abusive nor negligent. So this is where I feel compelled to throw in a plug for my father. I've regretted for 25 years that I was too exhausted by Dad's illness to say something at his funeral service, because that was a man who was truly a rock for us all and a shining example of faith, purity, and honesty. Not only a World War II hero, the reference of which you would never hear from his lips, Dad was a truly gentle and loving individual. Now, the exception to Dad's genteel demeanor was if he observed a person purposely cheating on their taxes, for he was higher up in the IRS. Or worse yet, if a person was an erratic driver, that would also draw his particular ire. That being said, I can only think of maybe once or twice that I actually observed Dad lose his temper with either me or my wonderful sister Cheryl. Now to think of it, I think both of those times were concerning something that I did, which we will not be discussing today. Anyways, Mom would be happy that I take this moment to thank Dad for being such an amazing example of what a man should be. So at this point, I need to bring up someone else who I am honored to say is like my second father. If anyone has had a parent remarry, they will understand that no one will ever replace their natural parent. But as I once told Mom, she made two great decisions in her life. The first was our dad, and the second was Paul. I guess Paul was another reward for Mom just being as great of a person as she was. There is no way Mom would have made it to 95 and a half if it wasn't for Paul. And not only because this great individual was there to physically help her, but Paul was there the last 22 years to give her that shining love and adoration that she deserved. Thank you, Paul, for all of that and just being the person you are. Now, I've just got to throw in the fact that there was an unexpected outcome to Mom's relationship with Paul. Let me tell you that prior to meeting Paul, Mom had no real idea of the distinctions between basketball, football, and baseball. She might have realized that footballs have a somewhat peculiar shape, and basketballs were larger than a baseball, but also round. But that was pretty much it. So it was truly bizarre when Paul transformed Mom into a Cleveland Indians fan. And not only that, Mom became expert in matters of baseball, down to the personalities attributable to the various team members. I would sit there stupefied and wide-eyed as she rattled off a synopsis of some recent game at the stadium. This is not to say this was not an intelligent woman. She started out working when we were in our pre-teens as a telephone surveyor, which is someone who collects data on consumer opinions. Thus, Mom preceded the now internet 1 to 5-star rating, and she was an early pioneer of the work-from-home person that we commonly see today. So if you walked into the kitchen in the evening to get a snack, there'd she be on the phone. Hello, do you own a separate home freezer? Oh, okay, thank you. Dial, because these were rotary phones. And she'd dial another, hello, do you own a separate home freezer? Oh, okay, thank you. She would call, I think, 100 people before some poor soul would finally say, yes, I do own a separate home freezer. And then they would be subjected to the dreaded Maxine interrogation. In this case, a litany of questions pertaining to separate home freezers. I'd like to observe this process with satisfaction, for at least it was someone else and not me undergoing the interrogation. She was very adept at getting information out of people. Now, in reference to motherly interrogations, I have to mention an example of one of my more distinct memories of such things. There came a Sunday when we normally went to visit our surrogate grandparents, the Christmans, out at Bass Lake in Chardon. I, being about 11 years old at the time, was of the age when I was kind of not wanting to do that particular Sunday. So I claimed not to feel that well enough to go. When Mom and Dad said it was okay for me to stay home that Sunday, I asked my cousin Joel if my cousin Joel could come over and keep me company. Amazingly, they assented to this request. Amazing because, let's just say, Joel and I, when combined together, had a proclivity towards creating undesirable outcomes. So, as one might expect, when everyone was gone, Joel and I decided to head down the basement to the chemistry set and try to create something which would result in a small, dramatic, yet controlled chemical reaction. Okay, I guess we were basically trying to make something explode. Well, it didn't take long for us to have a small fire going, which even caused the chemistry table for Micah to blister up. We put out the fire from the small reaction, but then noticed to our dismay that fires cause smoke, and that smoke had permeated the atmosphere of the Cowan home. Well, we opened all the windows, placed fans here and there. We're finally absolutely positive that that house smelled as clean as a spring breeze. Finally, the family returned home. Mom only had to take one step into the house before the inevitable, "What's that smell?" Basically a 3-word interrogation. So it took a very short time to elicit my confession, and subsequently no chemistry set for 1 year. So to move on with Mom's career, after a few years of home surveys, she set her sights on retail sales, which was something she was quite familiar with from the consumer standpoint, but though not necessarily the part actually paying retail. She managed the store called Scandinavian Specialties, a clothing and Scandinavian boutique owned by Väinö Holappa, her kindly boss, who was from Finland. She was very proficient in the role of buyer and manager for several years, and then went on to be the bookkeeper and buyer for Al's Pottery, which was a rather large kitchenware concern at that time. She worked there for several years before settling into retirement with Dad. Naturally, she was a wonderful grandmother and also volunteered for years at the hospital. Additionally, she initiated the Holocaust Speakers Fund in Dad's name at Temple Emmanuel. Another blessing from Mom was she was able to attend all 4 of her great-grandchildren's bar and bat mitzvahs. Okay, so one can't talk about one's mother without mentioning food. If you're Jewish, and especially if your mom was originally a Burman, her maiden name, and that's her original family, the Burmans. Now, you've got to understand something about the Burmans. Burmans like to eat. I mean, they pride themselves on eating, and everyone knows Mom was a great cook, and she always enjoyed watching us eat whatever we loved. But Mom had a somewhat peculiar relationship with food throughout her life. If you look at old photographs, Mom was a somewhat portly child, and there was definitely a carryover from that. As from the day I was conscious of such things going on around me, she was always on a diet. We would be having steak and potatoes and anything else our hearts desired, and she would be eating some kind of odd piece of squash accompanied by a pathetic and bizarre-appearing piece of fish. Basically, I learned not to look at what she was eating for fear of losing my appetite. Then, eventually came her ultimate revenge on the perpetual diet. In the last couple of years of her life, as her dementia released her from the demands we unwittingly place upon ourselves, she began to eat whatever she wanted and would do so with gusto. If we took her to a restaurant, she would easily out-eat me, and this is not an easy task. In fact, the day she passed, last Wednesday, 2 days ago, she had a complete breakfast, complete lunch, and then slipped peacefully away during an afternoon nap. Thank God. It was God's blessing for all of us that she was so comfortable at the end of her days. Thanks, Mom, for always being the best. We love you.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here for me and my family, and to celebrate the life of my grandmother, Maxine Cowan Fine, otherwise known as Grandma Mac, or fondly by her grandchildren as Bubby. She was the most resilient and loving mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. I'm sure for those of you that knew her very well, you would agree. From the time I was a very little girl, I have always looked up to and admired her for her kindness, compassion, and hard work. She loved spending time with her friends and family, and always had the gift of making anyone she spent time with feel like they were the most important person in the room. I have so many wonderful memories of her growing up. I spent several Friday afternoons with her, and she would take me shopping and sing songs with me, such as Sing, Sing a Song, and would take me to work with her, where I had the opportunity to watch her interact with other employees when she was the bookkeeper and buyer for Al's Pottery, as my uncle mentioned. She treated all the employees she worked with respect and patience and took her job very seriously. They looked up to her and respected her. She took great pride in what she did. This time I spent with her helped to mold me into the woman I am today, and I will always be grateful for this gift. She was one of the most beautiful women I have ever known, inside and out. Her smile always lit up the room, and she will always remain young and beautiful in my mind. Excuse me. She had the gift of inspiring others and to bring out the best in people. She always taught us to be grateful for our blessings in life. Even after my grandpa Art passed away, she continued to remain positive and was able to find the second love of her life, Paul Fine. And what a blessing that was. Paul, we are so grateful for all the love, adventures, and joy you've brought and shared with Grandma for the past 2 decades. She lived her life to the fullest, and it was full of adventures. I remember calling her when she was traveling with Paul, I believe it was Mexico, and listening to stories of them, probably in their early 80s, renting dune buggies and meeting people from all over the world. Another fond memory I have was when she traveled to California and met a couple who lived in Pasadena. They invited her and Paul to their home, and they ended up with front row seats to the Rose Bowl parade. They not only used to attend several Indians or Guardian games every summer, but they had the best seats in the house, right behind home plate. The ushers loved when they would attend games, and Graham and Paul would always come home with these amazing stories or just share conversations they had with the ushers. They'd also come home with bobbleheads, T-shirts, jackets, you name it, they got it. This is just another example of how others always embraced them and the effect they had on anybody that they met. I will miss you, Grandma, but please know that your kind, strong spirit, as well as your zest for life, will live in all of us and be passed down from generation to generation. Thank you for being such an integral part of our lives.
When I think of my Grandma Mac, there are so many wonderful memories that come to my mind. Fortunately, growing up just 5 minutes away from my grandma, weekend sleepovers were a regular occurrence. When we had sleepovers, she always started it with a wonderful meal. She was such an amazing cook. One of my favorite meals that she cooked was chicken paprikash, but there were so many others too. After dinner, I would usually hang out in the kitchen with her while she cleaned. You're fine. Thank you, Trace. While she cleaned. There she had a small black and white TV that she would always put on for me because Grandpa would be in the family room hogging the TV to watch his war movies. So her and I would spend time together in the kitchen and talk. We would watch game shows together and Golden Girls. Once in a while, I would get away with faking the hiccups, so she would give me a spoonful of sugar. At night, she would read Eloise to put me to sleep. Grandma taught me how to whistle, and commonly when I whistle, I think of her. As she watched me on the weekends during the daytime, we'd go for rides. We loaded in her car, and there was a tape holder on the floor on the left side. 3 of the tapes that I remember being in there were the musicals A Chorus Line, Oliver, and Annie. I often chose the Chorus Line tape, and we would sing show tunes from the beloved musical together. In more recent years, I would visit her at the Columbus Commons nursing home, and I would sing songs from Chorus Line, and she would remember some of the words and sing the bit of the tune along with me. One singular sensation. Grandma kept all of the pictures I ever drew, and she'd line them up in her basement, similar to what my mom does with the drawings, and I know she thinks about Grandma when she does that for her grandchildren. When it was my bat mitzvah, she created a brunch for me with all of my art that I drew over the years. She was so positive. She always made me feel like $100 and just good about myself. I have memories of going to visit her and Grandpa Art in Florida. We would play gin rummy and hang out by the pool. Grandma was a wonderful card player, as most of you know, and quite a bridge enthusiast. Grandma was so smart with bridge and so great with numbers. She taught me all of the games I know and games that I still play today. Grandma loved all of her grandchildren equally and great-grandchildren. She had a beautiful smile that would light up a room. She would sing, whistle, and cook up a storm, a true balabusta. Grandma Mac, I love you so much, and you will always be in my memories, and they will always live on. You truly were one singular sensation.
Thank you, Larry and Tracy and Julie, for your beautiful words. It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch, a fearful thing to love, hope, dream, to be and oh to lose. A thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings a painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death has touched. Maxine was a gardener. She loved flowers. In particular, she loved to grow African violets. And I think she taught Larry to do so too. So allow me to engage in the wonderful metaphor of gardening. there are guidelines on how to care for flowers, particularly African violets. And I would like to suggest that many of the ways we can look at the care of those violets runs in alignment with the ways in which Maxine cared for so many. Everything and everyone she cared for flourished under her guidance and love. African violets need light, first and foremost. And that is what Maxine provided for the important people in her life. She was a bright light, intelligent, kind, vivacious, high energy, would light up a room with her smile. She had a magnetic personality, which was mentioned more than once when the family and I met. That magnetic personality drew others to her all the time. Wherever she went, she made friends with others. Her light shone far and wide, and today we are reminded how that light can never be extinguished. Watering and feeding. Every African violet needs proper sustenance and nutrients. Maxine made sure that her family and friends were sustained with her love. Simply put, she loved to cook and bake, making the likes of chicken paprikash and chicken piccata, kreplach, brisket, sweet potato pie, to just name a few of her delicious dishes from which, as Larry stated, she would abstain. She also baked sticky buns, cookies, brownies, lemon bars for family and friends. She would make trays so you could take them to work or to your friends. But get them out of the house, she wasn't going to eat them. Atmosphere. African violets must grow in the right conditions. Maxine set about creating her own atmosphere that was true to who she was. She was a straight shooter. She told you, as Paul said, she told you how it is. She also knew how to create the right conditions for others. She would often take younger folks, colleagues she worked with, friends, she would take them under her wing to counsel them, to encourage them, to connect with them, to inspire them. Many looked to her for this advice, and she inspired confidence in them to do the things that they never thought they could do. She loved to root on the important people in her life, and that included, of course, her beloved Cleveland Indians. Paul and Maxine, it was stated, went to many a Guardians or an Indians game. You had special seats at Progressive Field that allowed the ushers to escort you from the car to her seat, and then from the seat back to the car. The ushers and staff in the section knew them so well and loved them, making special accommodations for the rest of the family. Paul, you and Maxine were royalty at these Progressive Field games. Soil. Soil is the foundation for any plant or flower, and that special mix for Maxine was really built on love. The love that she grew with both Art and Paul. Maxine was fortunate enough to actually have two loves in her life, just like you, Paul. She was married for 50 years to Art and another 22 to Paul. Paul and Maxine had already lived adjacent to one another in different environments, actually. But when you married your first partners and where you were, and then you found each other at Woodhawk, still feeling the tenderness of your respective losses, you drew comfort in each other in the knowledge that you each knew about that same kind of pain. Paul and Maxine lit a fire under each other. After Maxine had left a plate of her delicious cookies at Paul's door, little bit of I really want to be your friend. He later knocked on her door later on, telling her that she should get ready because in 10 minutes we're going to get ice cream. Maxine at the time had a kind of towel on her head. She really wasn't prepared. But somehow in 10 minutes, she got ready. And you went for ice cream. Maxine would nudge you, Paul, saying, you should either get busy living or get busy dying. I think she shared that with others as well. There was no in-between. And Paul said, I lucked out with Maxine. I adored her. She adored me. We were both adorable. And Tracy, you shared that their love was such an example to every married couple of how it should be done. Grooming. The leaves of the African violet need to be pruned periodically. In actuality, Maxine was always well-groomed, well-coiffed. She liked to do the same for others, taking her shears down to the basement, cutting Steve's hair. Steve, I still can't believe you made this happen, but apparently she did okay. Or aiding in the dyeing of the hair of her friends, which created quite a scent, to say the least. I'm being diplomatic. Maxine herself was put together, always put together, living by the belief that a woman should never leave her home without makeup on at the chance you'll run into someone you know. And indeed, Maxine dressed beautifully, looked younger than she really was. Tracy was once shopping with Maxine and Cheryl, and people wondered if Maxine was actually Cheryl's sister. Potting. All plants need to be repotted periodically to keep up with their growth and the changes that take place. For Maxine, she was always growing and moving and lively. She worked at Al's Pottery, as we said, and also for that Scandinavian firm, and was invaluable as an asset in both places. She volunteered at Montefiore at Posh Nosh, but gave up that volunteer gig because she had to wear a hairnet. She moved on to Hillcrest Hospital for over a decade. She was a craft maven. Cheryl recalled how she made dresses and gowns for countless events when she was growing up. And she never exhausted her appetite to create and manifest from her inherent gifts. She did so much. She knew so much. She loved to read, play bridge, mahjong, socialize with her broader community. And most of all, she kept busy being a lovely grandmother, a loving grandmother, and a great-grandmother to a wonderful brood that are now her legacy, many who are sitting over there right now. Maxine also felt a strong connection to her Judaism. As Larry stated, she and Art started a fund at Temple Emmanuel to educate about the Holocaust, to ensure that future generations would never forget the atrocities that took place in World War II. And she was also proud to hand down the traditions, the Jewish traditions, to future generations. Today, we consider everything, all that Maxine contributed to our lives, the nurturing, the growing, the care, the love. She will not soon be forgotten. Her love was boundless. Her love was a blessing. Zichrona livracha. May Maxine's memory forever be a blessing, and let us say, Amen. I invite you all to just take a moment as we consider the gifts that Maxine brought to each of our lives. And now we continue with the recitation of El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. We invite you to please rise as you are able. El מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המסי מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת מרים בת מלאי ומורס שהלכה לעולמה, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני ונחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר Amen. El Malei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Maxine Cowan Fine, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. As we turn to the conclusion of our service, you may be seated. As we turn to the conclusion of our service, we'd like to once again acknowledge Maxine's role in so many lives, caring wife of Paul, devoted mother to Cheryl and Steve, Larry and Katie, Michelle and Bobby, Michael, Martin and Catherine, Richard and Sabina, cherished grandmother to Tracy and William, Allison and Mark, Julie and Kathleen, Emily, Daniel, Sarah, Jenna, Jennifer and Robert, Joshua and Kristen, Jordan, Camille, Lane, Sarah, Nathan, Natalie, Max, Dana, and Julia, and loving great-grandmother to Joshua, Marley, Avery, Amanda, Ryan, Madison, Landon, Kelly, Greta, Ronan. What a legacy. Unbelievable. At this time, we're going to soon move to the burial at Mount Olive Cemetery, and following the burial, family will be receiving guests at Temple Tifereth, Israel, today until 8 p.m. Is that correct? Until 8 p.m., 26,000 Shaker Boulevard in Beechwood. Those who would like to make donations in her memory may do so to a charity of their choice.